John Wayne Gacy was born on March 17, 1942, in Chicago, Illinois, USA. His mother was Mary Elaine Robinson, and his father was John Stanley Gacy. He had Polish ancestry through his grandparents, and was the second of 3 children in his family. John had an altered, violent, and dramatic childhood. Basically, his father did not want him and completely preferred his 2 sisters, probably because he was a male, and the father only wanted one man in the house. There was also a lot of violence and alcoholism in his family. His father also suffered from alcoholism and constantly attacked him and the entire family. However, his father's anger almost always fell on him. At the age of 6, he suffered an assault that marked him for life. He also suffered from being overweight when he was very young, which was a problem for him because he suffered from several diseases and even had heart problems. He began to suffer from fainting spells at the age of 11, and his father paid no attention, saying that all he did was faint to get his mother's attention. However, at 16, he was discovered to have a blood clot in the brain and tried to receive some treatment to alleviate these problems. All these issues, as I mentioned, only made him depressed and gain more weight. This obviously made him unattractive to women at the time. So by 18, he did not feel attraction to almost anyone, nor did people feel attraction towards him. All this depression and these problems practically forced him to leave home at the age of 18, and he decided to go to Las Vegas, Nevada. Obviously, he had not completed his studies and had not finished high school, so it was very complicated to find work anywhere. However, he finally managed to find a job at a morgue. It is said that this is when his mental problems began. He seemed to like his work with corpses, especially when young men's bodies arrived. Many people even claimed that he probably committed necrophilic acts during this work. Which he later lied about in various interviews. However, it was never known if it was real or not. He continued to grow and continued to be overweight. However, being free from his family, he decided that being overweight would no longer be a problem for him, so he decided to seek success despite everything. This is where he met his first wife, Marilyn Myers. She was the daughter of a businessman who had acquired one of the Kentucky Fried Chicken franchises in Waterloo. After a while, this girl's father chose John as the franchise director. It seems that his downfall was starting to work in this place, as he obviously began to have more evident homosexual deviations with the young employees who came to this place. During the years 1967 and 1968, he committed his first crime. This crime was committed against a man named Edward Lynch, whom he persuaded to have relations with him, and then apparently beat him severely without killing him. Afterward, John apologized to him, saying he was very tense, so the boy decided not to say anything and continue with his life. His first severe crime was against a young man named Donald Voorhees. This young man was only 15 years old and was the son of a colleague of John's. It seems that John persuaded him to come to his house to watch pornographic films. The young man agreed, and then he apparently forced him to have sex with him. After assaulting him, he killed him and hid the body in the basement of his house. After committing this crime, he continued his life as if nothing had happened. One day, he apparently told his workplace employees that he was writing a book about sex, sponsored by the governor of Illinois. Some people in this group talked, and he was first captured and convicted of sodomy and sentenced to a total of 10 years in prison. Obviously, his wife, after this big scandal, requested a divorce from him after having 2 children with the man. However, it seems that he adapted very well to life in prison. He was a good man, and even became the chef of the place. He had such good behavior that after just 18 months, he was released. After leaving prison, he moved to Chicago and started a completely different life. He bought a house with a large basement that constantly had humidity problems, so sometimes it would emit bad odors from below. This is where he decided to open a contractor's business, which became his main way of approaching young people and having them as victims. There, he committed a new crime during the Christmas season against an 18-year-old whom he murdered. This was the first body he hid in his basement, which would practically become the cemetery for his victims. After arriving in this new neighborhood, as is usual in communities, Many neighbors came to welcome him. He met a woman named Carol Hoff, and it seemed they got along well from the first moment. They began a romance, and on June 1st, 1972, he married her as his second wife, holding the reception in his own house. People said that when they entered that day, they noticed a quite strange smell, like a dead animal or something similar. But he would tell them it was simply the smell coming from the basement due to the humidity he had previously mentioned. After marrying her, he wanted to enter the social life of the community, be accepted by everyone, and make people believe he was a good man. At this point, he decided to create his own clown costume, apply makeup to his face, and bring happiness to the entire neighborhood. He worked for a long time as a children's party entertainer, while simultaneously continuing his contractor's business. He even became quite recognized in the clown community under the name Pogo the Clown. He raised funds for different causes and even went to hospitals to entertain sick children, which for me is incredibly terrifying. While also exercising his clown persona in his contracting business, he began to have quite a few problems. He was an extremely stingy man, so he had many issues with his employees. It seems he had a very serious altercation with an employee named John Butkovich. Basically, he apparently didn't want to pay him something he owed, and they had a big problem. However, John called him to come to his house to try to resolve things. Obviously, the other man agreed in good faith, but what he ended up doing was assault and strangle him. In 1976, he divorced his second wife. It seems she suspected he was having an extramarital relationship with another woman. This was something positive for John because now he could bring anyone he wanted to his house without any problem. And that's when many young people began to disappear during this time. Neighbors said they heard screams coming from his house, but believed they were simply the relationships he was having, as most people already knew he was homosexual. He tortured many young men, forcing them to do horrible things on repeated occasions. He was denounced by some of the young men, but the police didn't believe them because he seemed to have a very well-constructed reputation, so they would say it was impossible that it was him, and they never arrested him. There was an occasion when he met a man named Jeffrey Rignall. Basically, this man apparently met him at a stop and simply said, "Hey, let's go somewhere." What he did was drug him with chloroform during the car ride. When the man awoke, he was already in John's house, tied to the wall and hanging. There, he assaulted him repeatedly, beat him considerably, and left him in a very serious condition. However, the man later awoke in the middle of the snow. Probably John had left him alive without realizing it, and he decided to go to the police and tell them everything. However, as I mentioned, they did not believe him, and so he continued his life, constantly burying many of the bodies in his own house. He would constantly throw parties and invite neighbors, and obviously, they would continue to notice the smell, but nobody said anything. He continued accumulating more and more dead bodies, reaching a total of 33. His downfall was basically when he tried to do the same with a man named Robert Peast, who told his mother he was going to a man's house to be hired for a summer job. However, the young man never returned home, and obviously, his mother became very alarmed. She tried to find out the place where her son had last gone, until her husband told her that the son had said he was going to the house of a certain John Gacy. The mother requested a search warrant for this man's house. However, it was delayed, and during this time, Gacy was busy hiding the body of this young man. Obviously, since he had already killed so many people, his basement was completely full, so now he had to see what he would do with this body. What he did was move it to the attic, and when the police reviewed the house, they found nothing because they never went up there. It seems that after all this, he tried to escape. However, during his escape, his car broke down, and he had to request a tow truck and return to the town. However, the police subsequently obtained another search warrant to review the house, but this time with specialized criminology detectives. When they entered, they noticed the particular smell emitted by decomposing bodies, so they obviously realized that there was at least one corpse of a person there. They also reviewed everything and found numerous pornographic photos and videos of men, many strange sexual toys, and even found some blood stains on the floor. They obviously began to go through the entire house and arrived at the basement where the strongest smell was coming from. It was there that they arrested John Gacy for the murder of these young men. They found a total of 27 bodies underneath the house, even covered by a concrete floor that Gacy had put in to try to prevent the smell from continuing to come out. However, it didn't work much. They were astonished by all the bodies of these young men that were there, including bodies of friends' children that he himself had gone to console when the children had not reappeared. This was obviously very shocking to the community, because this was supposed to be a good man who did nothing wrong. They found 27 bodies in his house and others in a nearby river. Finally, this man was processed for the murder of all of them. He was given a total of 21 life sentences and 12 death sentences. Until finally, several months after being in prison, he was injected with a lethal substance that obviously killed him. His last words were apparently, "Kiss my," and he finally died around 12:58 on May 10th, 1994. As for his mother, who was still alive at the time, she defended him tooth and nail, saying he was completely innocent throughout this process. However, he was obviously found guilty, and he also accepted that he had killed all these people but that it wasn't his fault. Instead, he suffered from a kind of dementia and no longer remembered how he had done it. Obviously, many psychological studies were done on him. The psychologists were also amazed, saying that he was not bipolar but more like a very, very strange sociopath. They probably agreed that he might have suffered from the dementia he claimed. During his time in prison before receiving the death penalty, he also painted many paintings related to Pogo the Clown and some of his favorite serial killers. He was even inspired to paint It, the Clown from Stephen King, and told everyone that killing him was not going to solve anything, as it was not going to bring back the lives of the people he had killed.